Okay, this is the more complicated one. What we have to do is we have to get these tubes installed, both the vertical and the horizontal propeller tubes, and then we can install these. Now these are going to have to be cut but to size, and then I'm going to have to cut this one to size as well, so there's going to be a bit of fiddling about, and we've got to get these guys set up so that they're meshing, and that's going to be a little fiddly, but we'll get there. Now the first job is to the holes for the 6mm tubes. Now I bought this stainless steel 6mm tube with a 3mm hole in it. The 3mm hole is just slightly over 3mm, and unfortunately the 6mm tube is just slightly over 6mm, so I've had to remount these holes that the tubes are going into just over 6mm, but it depends on the actual tube that you have. The tube that I bought for the first one of these marks was absolutely spot on. This one is a little over on both dimensions, but it will work. So the first job is to install these. Now these two tubes, the length of these, the longer one, the one that goes vertically, is 55mm, and the other one I think is 41, yes, and the horizontal one's 40mm, and then I have a small 10mm one which goes in there, which takes the end of when the prop shaft comes through, it gives it something to bear on in there. So there's a wee 10mm sliver of 6mm tube to go in there, and I've reamed, as I say, these all out slightly, and we're just now going to fit these. I'm just going to trial fit this guy here, and this is a little difficult to do. Let me just get a better pair of tweezers. Right, going to use these tweezers to put this in and then just push it down in. Now the problem with these is that we have to glue them in place, so I'm going to use this is Zap-A-Gap, which is actually it's basically a CA glue, but it does fill gaps slightly, so we're going to use it to lock these in place. So I'm going to put the small ones in first. So I'm just going to put a little bit of super glue or Zap-Gap in that hole, and then we will place that and push it in, and that's that one in place. And we'll do the same for this one. Oops. I haven't actually tried this one in this hole yet, so let's try it first to make sure it does go in. Go in. Okay, it's not quite fitting, so I'm just going to put a drill bit in here. And just make sure it's completely out to the dimension I need. Right. Hopefully that will have that sorted. I'll just give that a little ream around the edge with a deburr just to get rid of the crap. And we'll try this fella again, see if he fits in. Yeah, perfect. So put a little bit of gap filling CA glue in there. Drop this boy in. And that should be that. Alright, now we're going to put in the two shafts, the propeller shaft. Now, the thing about these prop shafts is they've got to project out 20 millimeters. So I'm going to mark those at 20 millimeters. Marker pen. It should be flush on the inside and should come 20 millimeters beyond the main body. So there's a mark on it. Okay, so here we go again. In this case, I'm going to, you really only get one go at these, so you have to get it right the first time. So let's just do a trial fit. Yep, that's fine. 20 mil, and it's just inside at 20 mil, so that's perfect. So I'm going to put some glue around that. And then I'm going to push this guy into the 20 millimeter mark and just leave it at that. Okay, we're going to put in the vertical tubes now, and in this case they just come flush with the inside of the little gearbox space there, and they sit proud about 5 mil. I think it's 5 mil. Yeah, it's 5 mil proud. So I'll get going with this one. Right. Seem to have more super glue over me on the cutting board, but never mind. So that's that one in, and we'll now put super glue everywhere. And we'll now do the other side. Just make sure it goes in, and we'll stick it in so that it is flush with the inside. Right, what I have to do is leave that a second or two to go off. Remove my fingers from the, seem to have been super glued together with everything. That's all right. Okay, now that we have the propeller tubes and the little bearing tube installed, the next thing is to insert the actual prop shaft and the shaft going up to the motor, and that means sorting out the spur gears. So just to show you what we're going to try and do here, draw a little diagram. Now if you think of this, is this the bit in red is the hole we're going to put all this stuff into. This is this chamber here, and there's the main prop shaft going out to the propeller on this side, running through the shaft. So that runs through here and into the little bearing at this end to support it, and then we have the other shaft going up to the motor through the vertical one there. But what we've actually got to do is make sure that these spur gears mesh correctly. And by that, what I mean is we can't have them meshing like this or meshing like this. They've got to be as accurately as we can, so that the full bearing surface is bearing on the full bearing surface there, and that'll be quieter and more efficient. So how are we going to do that? That means we're just going to pack behind this one. This will be locked to the shaft eventually with a little grub screw, but we'll just pack behind it with some washers, and the same with this one. We'll pack it behind with some washers so that we can play about with it until it gets right. So what I'm going to do first is I've got a spur gear attached to a small shaft here, which is going to be the one going up to the motor. Now, we haven't trimmed it off completely for length yet, but we'll do that later on. And we have the other prop shaft with the propeller on it coming here, which will come through. And I'm going to put I'm just going to slide this horizontal one on, and we're going to play about with this until we get them looking as if they're meshing, and then I'll try and work out how many washers to put behind it. So initially, let's just stick this fella in. Okay, so that's him in, and he can turn away there. And we'll push this one in from the back. And I'm going to put the second spur gear. And we're going to avoid the fat fingers and use the tweezers. Yeah, right, okay. All right, so these aren't locked on yet, but so what we want to do here initially is I'm just going to push this fella forward so that it looks as if it's in the right place to mesh with this. And that looks pretty good. And I put a couple of washers on behind the vertical one, and you know, that's not bad. That's not bad. So that the front face of this spur gear on top is facing down to the start of that inner ring. So that's actually not looking too bad. And that's with two washers underneath the lower one. So we have a gap here, and I'll need to put some washers in there. That looks like 3 or 4 washers in there. They're about 1/2 mil thick. So I'm going to do that. And then once we have that done, we can tighten everything up. And I'll put the collar. There's a small collar here, which I'm going to put on at this end. And the idea behind that is that collar will bear against this here, and it will also take some of the drive force from the prop, because this will be pushing forward as the motor is running forward, and we'll take it from there. So rather than put you through all the pain and misery of me fiddling about with this to get the washers right, I'm going to put a couple of washers in behind here and try it, and if it doesn't work, I'll add some more in, and then once that's done, I'll come back. Okay, I've padded this out now. It ended up I needed about 4 washers behind that, and I needed to add another one underneath that. So there was a wee bit of fiddling about to get it to work, but now it runs very smoothly. So just twisting this, and this all works very well. So what I'm going to do now, and I've also of course put the collar in and just a washer the other side of it for it to bear on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some grease to it, and I'm using, this is actually for fishing reels, so I'm going to add a little bit of grease to this. And then the last 2 jobs to do are, I'll take the prop shaft off, it's going to unscrew it. I've got to put on the weed guard and then just the bottom casing. So I'll do that, and then I'll come back and show you what we've got. All right, so I've put the weed guard on, and I've screwed on the bottom cover. So we now have a prop shaft assembly. And here's one that I made earlier. So we now have both port and starboard assemblies done. Important to get them the right way round, because the starboard one will actually normally rotate clockwise, and the port one will rotate anti-clockwise. So that's this bit done. So what I'll do now is I will cut this off, these shafts off. I'm going to cut these off about 10-12 mil up from that, and then when they will be assembled into the main body, and then we'll put the shafts on and the motors. So that's probably the next stage.